Millionaire CEO offered $1 for one night with a poor masseur. His secret left her speechless. What happens when the most powerful woman in tech meets the only man who doesn't fear her name and vanishes before she can learn why? What begins as a scandal in a spa unravels into a corporate war, a buried legacy, and a love story built not on power but on silence. Before we start the story, write in the comments from which part of the world you're watching today. Do you believe people change? Not in stories, I mean in real life. Because I didn't. Not until a man refused $1 million to touch me. The room smelled like eucalyptus and stillness. It was the kind of silence you paid thousands for. The silence of walls that absorbed secrets, of staff trained to disappear, of no phones, no names, no titles. And that's exactly what she needed. Elisa Parker, head of a multi-billion tech conglomerate, the queen of 3 hostile takeovers and 5 acquisitions, had not slept more than 4 hours in a week. She wasn't here to rest. She was here to disappear. She checked in under a false name. No assistants, no security, no makeup. Just one rule: no one was to treat her as anything other than Miss Anna. By the end of her first day, she hated the place. Too quiet, too slow, too equal. But on the second day, during a session she hadn't even booked, someone knocked on her door and told her, "The new therapist is available now. Would you like your treatment earlier?" She shrugged. Sure, why not? And that's when she met him. He didn't bow, didn't introduce himself with reverence. He didn't even glance at her the way others usually did, the flicker of recognition, fear, calculation. Instead, he merely said, "You can lie down, or sit. Your call." His voice was steady, his hands firm, his eyes unreadable. Halfway through the session, Elisa broke the silence. "Where are you from?" "Here and there." "You knew?" "No." The silence returned, but something shifted. She was no longer lying on the table. She was waiting. For what? She didn't know. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "Yes." "And?" He shrugged. "That doesn't change your muscles." It was the first time in years she felt invisible, and it didn't offend her. It fascinated her. After the session, she didn't leave. She sat up, wrapped in the thin white robe, eyes fixed on the man folding towels at the sink. "What if I asked you to spend the night with me?" she asked. He didn't flinch. "I'd say no." Elisa tilted her head. "Even for $1 million?" He turned to her. "Especially for $1 million." She laughed, not the polite, practiced smile for boards and investors, a real laugh. It caught her off guard. "Are you religious?" "No." "Married?" "No." "Gay?" "No." "Then what's your problem?" He took a long breath. "I don't sell myself." That's all. She didn't know whether to slap him or kiss him. And just like that, he left. That night she didn't sleep. She paced the stone floors of her villa, poured herself a drink, changed clothes, changed again. There were no emails, no updates, no deals to close. Just silence. And in that silence, something ugly crawled up from her chest. Rejection, not from a man in a boardroom, not from a venture capital committee, but from someone who had nothing to lose and refused to take what she offered. It wasn't about sex, it was about control. And for the first time in 15 years, she didn't have it. 3 days later, it happened. Someone had recorded her storming out of the spa in fury, shouting into the air, "Do you know who I am?" The video leaked. First, it was shared on a gossip forum. Then came the reaction videos. Memes, think pieces, interviews, podcasts. The CEO and the $1 million rejection. Some praised Lucas, though no one knew his name, as a symbol of integrity. Others mocked her, the billionaire desperate for intimacy. The board called. Investors wavered. One major partner suspended negotiations. And Elisa, for once, didn't fight it. She sat in silence, watching that 2-minute clip on a loop. Watching herself, not the mogul, not the icon, but a woman, angry, undone, small. And she whispered to herself, "Who the hell is he?" In that moment, a decision was made. She wasn't going to sue. She wasn't going to deny it. She was going to find him. and she was going to understand why a man with no power could make her feel powerless, and why it mattered more than any boardroom ever had. To be continued. Every empire falls, not from the outside, but from one crack inside that no one noticed. His name became mine. The first board meeting after the spa incident lasted 13 minutes. Elisa didn't speak. She sat at the head of the table in a room of 20 polished executives, watching them shift in their seats, avoid her gaze, sip water they didn't need. At minute 7, someone cleared their throat. At minute 10, someone said, "We're considering a communication strategy." By minute 13, she stood up and walked out. The media fire had spread faster than even she predicted. It wasn't just the video anymore, it was what it symbolized. A symbol of power finally told no. A symbol of feminine authority humiliated. A symbol of wealth rejected. They called him the man with no price. The quiet one. The honest one. The one who dared to walk away. But no one knew his name. Not yet. Elisa's assistant, Julian, appeared in her private office 3 hours later with trembling fingers and a printed file. I pulled what I could. Speak. No employment record before this year. He's listed only as Lucas H., with a local license for therapy work. He paid everything in cash. No social media. No ID picture. But, Julian hesitated, there's a trace of an older address, linked to a private residency program in Taipei, and a few redacted files from a security company. Looks like corporate clearance levels. Elisa's eyes narrowed. Get me the rest. I'll try. No, don't try. Get it. That night she made the call herself, a private investigator she hadn't used in years, the kind who dealt with offshore networks, silent transfers, and names erased from records. 2 days later, a name came back, Lucas Huang. 3 years ago, he disappeared from corporate life. Before that, he worked under an alias in one of the Jiang Group's sister companies in mainland China. Listed not as an heir but as a strategy consultant. His last known appearance in the public sphere, a private funeral for a boy named Jiang Rui, a teenager and youngest son of Jiang patriarch Wei Ming. Then nothing. Julian leaned against the glass, whispering like they were already being watched. Do you know who Jiang Wei Ming is? Elisa looked up. I've dealt with his fund. Ruthless old man. Half of East Asia is tied to his debt. He owns media, ports, and half a dozen defense suppliers. Julian swallowed. Lucas Huang is his son. Impossible. Born to a second wife, raised in Shanghai, sent abroad, groomed to take over. Then why the hell is he giving massages in a spa? Julian paused. Maybe he walked away. The thought stayed with her through the night. Why would someone raised in a dynasty walk into obscurity? And not just walk, erase himself? The files came slowly, carefully, discreetly. One showed images of Lucas standing beside Jiang Rui, arms around his shoulders. The brothers, one full of light, the other calm, composed. Another, news coverage of a car crash, a wreckage on a bridge. Jiang Rui, dead. Elisa flipped through the images, reports, internal memos. Then it appeared. An encrypted letter leaked by an anonymous whistleblower 2 years ago. A letter written by someone inside Jiang Corp, warning of internal corruption, political blackmail, and the cover-up of Rui's death. The signature had been wiped, but something in the phrasing was unmistakable. It was Lucas. Elisa stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. A man who walked away from billions. A man who lost his brother. A man who tried to expose his own family and disappeared. Suddenly, the pieces fit. He hadn't rejected her out of pride. He had principles. And they terrified her. Because if he couldn't be bought, what did that make her? The next morning, Elisa arrived at headquarters an hour before dawn. Her name was trending again. Who is Lucas? People were theorizing. Some guessed ex-intelligence, others said a monk. A few believed he was a ghost. One article, anonymously published, said, a man who doesn't want anything, not money, not fame, not favors, is the most dangerous person in the room. She smiled. Then she looked into the mirror. And for the first time in years, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The storm wasn't just in the media. Her company had taken a hit. Investors were whispering. A major data security partner pulled out pending review. And the worst part, none of it had anything to do with Lucas directly. It was her reaction that caused it. Her obsession, her silence, her loss of composure. A crack had formed, not in the world, inside her. That evening, she took the car out alone. No guards, no assistant, no tracker. Just an address, the last one Lucas had used before disappearing the first time. A one-bedroom flat above an old noodle shop on the east edge of the city. She knocked. No one answered. She waited, then slid a small card under the door. Her personal number, handwritten. "I'm not here to win. I'm here to understand." She turned to leave, but before she reached the stairs, a voice called from behind. Soft, calm, familiar. "You're not used to hearing no, are you?" She turned. Lucas stood in the doorway, wearing the same kind of shirt he had at the spa. Plain, unassuming, but his eyes, they weren't calm now. They were sharp. And just like that, the storm found its center. Not in the media, not in the boardroom, but in the quiet between two people who didn't know yet if they were allies or enemies. Everyone wants the truth, until it ruins the story they've been telling themselves. Lucas didn't invite her in. He stepped aside. That was the difference. Elisa crossed the threshold not as a CEO or a billionaire or a woman used to owning the space, but as a guest. The apartment was small but not poor, sparse but not unlived. A single shelf with books in Mandarin and French. One framed photo, a boy smiling at the sea. No television, no tech, no noise. She waited until he sat down. Then she asked, "Why did you disappear?" He looked at her with that maddening stillness. Then, "You already know the pieces. What are you really asking?" She met his gaze. "Why throw it all away?" Lucas exhaled, long and slow. Then he began. His name had once been Jiang Liu Han, but no one outside the family called him that. Lucas was his school name, given when he was 12 and sent to Switzerland to learn the rules of diplomacy, silence, and money. He'd been raised for inheritance, groomed by private tutors, mentored by men who wore watches worth more than small nations. But he had one soft spot, his younger brother, Rui. Where Lucas had learned to suppress everything, Rui couldn't hide his heart. The boy was brilliant, impulsive, and defiant. He questioned the family's business, challenged his father openly, and, worst of all, fell in love with a woman they didn't approve of. One night, Rui called Lucas in a panic. He'd discovered something, a deal hidden under shell corporations, tied to weapons development in regions under sanctions. A deal their father had denied existed. 2 days later, Rui's car lost control on the bridge near Ling County. No skid marks, no investigation, just a closed casket and a non-disclosure agreement forced on the mother. Lucas knew. He knew because he'd seen the surveillance files before they were deleted. He knew because he'd read the one document Rui had copied and stored in an encrypted drive, the same one Lucas later used to leak what he could. But no one wanted the story. Too risky. Too powerful. So Lucas walked. He renounced the name, gave up access to everything, and vanished. Elisa sat frozen, watching him speak, not with drama, but with the quiet grief of someone who had already mourned too long. "Why the spa?" she asked finally. "Because it was the only job where no one asked me to lie." Outside, the city was beginning to dim into blue. Cars passed. Life continued. Inside, Elisa's world was cracking, not because of what he'd said, but because she believed him, and because she knew what it meant. It meant her world, the one she ruled, wasn't as different from his as she wanted to think. "Why didn't you let me find you?" she asked. "I didn't want to become your next project." "Is that what you think I do?" "No," he said. "That's what I know you do when you're scared." She almost laughed, then she almost cried. Instead, she asked, "And now?" Lucas looked at her, not past her, not through her. At her. "I think you're here because something broke, and you're trying to decide whether to glue it back together or let it fall." The conversation turned. Slowly, Gently. She told him things no one else knew, the lawsuit she settled in private that kept a whistleblower quiet, the night she made a decision that cost 100 people their jobs but saved a quarter point on the stock price, the fiancé she left because he said, "I support you," but always with an eye on her wallet. She talked. He listened. Not like an analyst, like a witness, like someone who understood the difference between guilt and shame. At midnight he made tea, the real kind, leaves, steam, no sugar. They sat without speaking for a while, and then she asked, "If I said I wanted to work with you, not hire you, would you?" He tilted his head. "Why?" "I have a negotiation next week with a Korean syndicate. They're playing cold. I need someone who sees the game before it starts. I think that's you." Lucas looked at the tea. "I said I wouldn't be bought." "You wouldn't. This isn't about money." He said nothing. Then, "If I say yes, I'm in. No conditions, no masks. You'll see me exactly as I am." "Same," she said. A pause. Then yes. What she didn't know was that her phone had already been compromised. What he didn't know was that a private plane from Shanghai had landed that morning, with a passenger list marked confidential and a destination set to her office. And what neither of them knew yet was that by agreeing to work together, they had both declared war. Not against each other, but against everything they once belonged to. The boardroom was colder than usual. Too much glass, too many eyes. Elisa sat at the head of the oval table, spine straight, fingers motionless. Around her, 12 directors whispered in polished voices, cautious and brittle. They weren't sure yet if she was weakened or more dangerous than ever. Across from her sat Lucas. But not that Lucas, not the quiet man in linen shirts. This one wore a tailored suit, a steel watch, and the same unreadable gaze he once used to survive family dinners among billionaires. He looked like he belonged there, because once he did. The meeting was a formality. The real event would happen in 3 days, Seoul. A high-stakes negotiation with an alliance of Korean investors who were threatening to pull 9-figure commitments. They wanted assurances, guarantees, leverage. Elisa had none of those left. Her reputation had taken too many hits. Her closest clients were reconsidering. And in the background, the Jiang machine was moving, slowly, deliberately. It began with strange denials on cloud contracts. Then, 3 major clients paused payments. A 4th issued a statement citing ethical concerns. Julian appeared in her office the next morning, pale and sweating. "We have a breach." Elisa didn't blink. "Where?" "Infrastructure, passwords, voice notes, your calendar. Possibly personal files." She turned to Lucas. He was already typing. By midnight, they knew. A custom malware worm had been embedded in a calendar attachment 2 weeks earlier. It had opened a back door into her internal systems. Not many people could have coded it. Even fewer would have dared. Only one person had both the access and the motive. Jiang Wei-ming. Lucas sat in silence for a long time that night. He didn't need to guess. He knew his father's methods. Psychological pressure first, then economic, then personal, then destruction. He also knew this was just the beginning. He pulled a small black phone from a drawer, untraceable, offline. He sent one message. "He's moving. I'll need 2 layers cut." No mistakes. Seoul, they arrived without announcement, without entourage. Just the 2 of them. The meeting was in a penthouse suite, surrounded by security, translators, assistants, and enough posturing to fuel 3 governments. But Lucas? He walked in and changed the air. He greeted the elders in perfect Korean, deferred without submission, spoke only when it mattered. And when the lead investor made a sharp comment about Elisa's recent scandals, Lucas didn't translate it word for word. He turned it. "Chairman O is curious," Lucas said calmly. "Why a woman of your strength tolerates men who measure power by shame." The room went still. Elisa smiled and spoke in Korean, "Because I let them talk long enough to show me who they really are." From that moment, the meeting shifted. The deal closed 3 hours later. $15 million in soft investment, with expansion options under one condition, that Lucas remain as liaison. Elisa agreed without hesitation. She didn't care about the money. She cared that the man who once walked away from everything had just helped her keep everything that mattered. That night, in her hotel suite, they stood on opposite sides of the room, backlit by the city. "I should have known who you were," she said quietly. "You weren't supposed to." "I know, but still." He looked at her. "You would have treated me differently." She nodded. "Yes, and that would have ruined everything." A long pause, then she added, "But I'm not sorry. Neither am I." They didn't touch, but something deeper passed between them, a truth, a promise, a quiet defiance. The next morning, everything changed. An anonymous account leaked confidential emails from Elisa's company, real ones, selectively edited to imply collusion, fraud, and data manipulation. Media pounced, clients panicked. A letter arrived at her desk, a formal buyout offer, signed by a holding company tied to the Zhang family. With one sentence, "We clean what you break." Attached, a clause. If she sold now, her name would be preserved, her legal exposure erased, her wealth intact. All she had to do was disappear. She read the letter, then folded it once, neatly, and set it on fire. Lucas was already preparing to leave. She found him in the garage, bag in hand. "You're running," she said. "I'm protecting you." "I didn't ask you to." He turned. "You didn't have to. My father doesn't bluff. He'll keep coming. You were fine before me. You'll be fine after." She stepped forward. "Is that what you think? That I'm fine? You think I fight for this company because I'm scared of losing it?" Lucas stayed silent. She walked up to him, closer than she ever had. "You changed the way I see the world, not by saving me, but by refusing to be saved. Don't take that from me now." His voice dropped. "If I stay, it will get worse." "I'm not afraid of worse." "I am." A long silence, then he handed her a folded note. "When you learn to trust silence," he said, "I'll come back." And then he was gone. Elisa didn't cry. She didn't rage. She turned, walked back into the office, fired 3 people, hired 2 forensic analysts, made a call to an old contact in Brussels. And for the first time since the video, she gave a press conference. 10 minutes. No spin. Just the truth. And when asked about Lucas, she said only, "Some people are not for sale. And if we ever build a world that respects that, maybe we'll finally be worth living in." The most powerful thing a person can say isn't yes or no. It's enough. The office was quiet. Not silent. Quiet in that particular way places get before they fall. Emails still blinked. Phones still rang. But no one believed the center would hold. Elisa sat in her glass-walled corner suite, staring at a news ticker scrolling across a muted screen. It ran the headline for the 5th time that morning. "Whistleblower or corporate lover? Parker declines to deny ties to Zhang defector." The buyout offer had tripled overnight, $3 billion, an elegant number, enough to disappear, to rebuild, to retire. The kind of number that came with polite pressure and legal immunity. She could vanish, the market would cheer, the board would breathe, the press would move on. And Lucas? He was gone. Again. Julian stepped into the room, holding an envelope. "This just came." "No return address?" He shook his head. "But it's his handwriting." Elisa took it, hands steady, heart not. Inside was a single photograph, not a love letter, not a threat. It showed a boy, 10, maybe 11, standing in front of a rice field under grey sky, holding the hand of a younger boy, grinning. On the back, 5 words. "What if we built different?" No signature, just the question. 2 days later, the board convened for an emergency session. 12 chairs filled with 12 nervous people, all expecting the same thing: a clean exit. They'd prepared the release, the PR roadmap, the graceful handover to a shell company with Zhang interests. Elisa let them speak first. They praised her for her legacy, her contribution, her maturity. Then they asked for her decision. She stood, held the room with her eyes, and said, "No." The room went still. "I'm not selling, not this company, not my name, not for $3 billion, not for 10. One of the older members cleared his throat. You do realize what this means. We're looking at bankruptcy, lawsuits, reputational collapse. Are you prepared to lose everything? Elisa's answer was simple. I already have. The storm that followed was swift. 3 major partners cut ties. A compliance investigation launched within 48 hours. Analysts downgraded the company to high risk, and in the middle of it all, she kept working. No speeches, no media spins. She cut waste, sold assets, streamlined operations, protected her team, and waited. Exactly 1 week later, at 7:23 in the morning, he walked in. No announcement, no drama. Lucas, unshaved, exhausted, holding a worn laptop and a folder thicker than a phone book. Julian froze. Elisa didn't let him finish. She walked straight to Lucas, took the folder from his hand and said only, "Did you bring all of it?" All of it. The contents of the folder would become the cornerstone of the case that shook 3 international holdings and resulted in the freezing of 9 offshore accounts. Lucas didn't just come back, he came back armed. The documents he'd gathered were precise. Dates, emails, contracts, all linking Jang Corp and its front companies to data theft, false acquisitions, and a bribery chain spanning 5 countries. The board wanted blood, but Elisa had learned something more powerful than vengeance. She didn't bury the truth, she published it, openly, publicly, with a signed statement, if this company survives, let it survive on truth. If it falls, let it fall with its name intact. What followed was not a miracle. The company did lose half its value, but it survived, because people, clients, employees, even former competitors saw something rare. A company that told the truth, and meant it. A CEO who didn't hide behind lawyers, and a man who could have disappeared again, but chose not to. 2 months later, Elisa and Lucas stood in a half-empty workspace, sleeves rolled, markers in hand, sketching on glass boards, not rebuilding the same empire, creating something new. A startup, small, stripped down, international from day one. No stock options, no front groups. One rule written on the wall: do not build what you will later fear. One night, months later, after the lawyers and papers and cameras had disappeared, they sat on the roof of the new office. No guards, no assistants. Just the hum of a vending machine and the warmth of a slow summer wind. Elisa turned to Lucas. "You know," she said, "you still never told me the real reason you refused me that night." He smiled just a little. "I didn't want to ruin the silence.